talk to you about and what I want you to repeat back by the time I finish is the simple word thanks. I came back to West Virginia from being in a lot of different places to create a project that should be done by America and to create it from West Virginia and to do such a good job that the rest of the country would follow on. That is our mission in the nonprofit called Thanks, Plain and Simple. The plain and simple means it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, your background, but it matters that we pull together and that we do work for America that should be done. So we started the nonprofit, and soon after we decided that the best way to prove that people can pull together was to do the Rosie the Riveter project. So in 2008, I interviewed my first Rosie the Riveter. Her name was Garde Kozelik. She's now 104 years old and still living. And I was so incredibly impressed, touched, inspired by this woman that I left her house with a recorder in my hand, and I looked down at that recorder and I said, there is absolutely no way that I'm going to just put this on a shelf. The American public needs to know these women. So we started at that point just doing interviews, which are extremely necessary, but they're not sufficient for people to know the Rosies and to be part of the Rosie movement, which is now underway. The reason that the Rosies became so really, I guess I would say inspirational to me, are that I'm now 80, I'll be 80 this summer, and I grew up during the war, and I always wondered why people didn't remember the war years better. I certainly really worried that I had not asked my mother, who was a Rosie, what she did, and she died before I could ask. And a few times she started to tell, they would tell her that it was unimportant. Anyhow, we've worked now 11 years on the Rosie the Riveter project, and what we've done is not just interview Rosies, but we saw that we had to do projects like we're doing today with the Rose Garden. That is by another organization, but we saw that people have to go do something or they're not going to remember it. So we started projects, and that was phase one of our work, and we decided very early on that what we were learning we had to pass on. And one is that if you do a project for a Rosie the Riveter or Rosie the Riveter Remembrance, be sure that it is sassy. Now, when I grew up, my grandmother would say, don't you sass me back, don't be sassy. And I first thought, well, I'm not going to call it sassy because, it has a negative feeling. But I now feel it has the right feeling because it means you stand straight up and you're noticed, and you don't have to talk back, you just have to cooperate. So sassy means sustainable. Any project you do should be sustainable. Don't do something that 5 years from now will fall apart and people see nothing but the ruins or something that doesn't look good. So it has to be sustainable. That's the S. A is achievable. Don't bite off more than you can chew. It's very much better to do a small project, maybe just an art project, and keep that as record and make sure that people understand what the Rosies are about. So it has to be achievable. SS, S-A-S-S, means a simple statement as to what the Rosies mean and what is the legacy of the Rosies, and Y means involve youth. And here you are, the youth, and I cannot say how glad I am that you are. We have a sassy day here today, don't we? Yes. We do. Now, one of the things that we learned in these last 11 years is that the Rosies did a lot more than just the work during World War II. That was totally and completely important. There were as many women working on the home front as there were men in the military. I had the women not been involved. So that's important. It's critically important. But when you listen to these women and do these interviews, you realize these women have lived through a century, the century, that has seen more change than any other century in the history of human family. So one of the things to remember is they know about the Depression, they know about conserving, they know about not only working in factories, but trying to bring the men home, trying to keep body and soul together and family together. After the war, the most important thing that I have seen is that so many of the Rosies and other women took care of men who were injured in body and spirit, and have not been given proper credit for that. I cannot even begin to tell you how touched I am by some of the stories of the women who took care of men who were injured. Men, I'll think of one, Neva Reese. She fell in love with her husband, and they were not married before the war. Neva made Goodyear bumps in Akron, Ohio, and her husband came back after being in a trench in New Guinea for 4 years. He came back with jungle rot and malaria, and he eventually was paralyzed from the neck down, and she took care of him for years. This is not unusual, folks. We need to give them credit for a whole lot more than just that moment in history, meaning World War II, but the effects of the war. I'm another example. My mother raised me saying to me very clearly, "You are so lucky. You are growing up in a land of freedom. You will get an education, and you will be able to do things that women have never done before. Be proud, and most of all, don't waste your freedom." And those are almost exact words from my family. The women in my family, my grandmother and my mother, repeated those things to me all the time. So these Rosies also raised women like me who basically learned from their mothers. They can do it. The other thing that I think is most important in terms of the history of the Rosies is they've learned to pull together. What World War II was all about was pulling together. It wasn't about men versus women. It wasn't about who could do a better job. It was about pulling together for freedom. The third thing we've learned then is the Rosie legacy, and the Rosie legacy is to pull together, to do highest quality work, to do it in a cooperative and happy spirit, or at least if you're not happy, don't fight and bicker with one another. And finally, do it for the cause of freedom, and make sure that we preserve freedom with not only a sense that we're glad to have it, but that takes a huge amount of responsibility to use it wisely. So those three things are the things we learned in the first 11 years. Now we're starting the American Rosie movement, and our goal in the American Rosie movement is, and this is phase 2 of our work, is that every community in America will know about the Rosie the Riveters. They'll look for them, they'll interview them, and we want every community in America to try to leave something behind, just as they did for the veterans. And it's not just because they contributed in World War II, but because without the Rosies, we would not have pulled together. It's a symbol of pulling together. So the American Rosie movement, we believe, is launched, and I believe that today is an important day. I came back to West Virginia to do a project from West Virginia because I wanted my home state and a rural state in America to be represented, not just the big cities, which are very important, but we needed the whole picture. Now we've got all kinds of projects. Bluebird nest boxes. We've named 2 interstate bridges in West Virginia, the Rosie the Riveter Bridge. We've named the only government building in America that's named the Rosie the Riveter. We've done 15 different projects. We choose to do them because when they are sassy And when they can be repeatable, then we call it a Rosie the Riveter project. So that's the Rosie River Movement Phase 2. Phase 3 will be in 4 years. What can we accomplish in 4 years? That was the length of the time that the women worked on the home front. What can we achieve in 4 years? I think we can do a social movement, and we call it a social movement in a essentially quite serious tone, because I believe that it's time in America to pull together, and I think that everybody recognizes that. That the thing that's lacking now in America is we have the freedom, but we don't know quite what to do with it. So let's just go out and do projects in the name of Rosie the Riveters and say what it proved is that we can pull together. One of the projects we did was write a song. I'm going to tell you the words. We didn't get it performed until it was written 10 years ago, and we didn't even really bother to get it performed until the Philadelphia Girls Choir performed it a year ago this month. I'll tell you the words, and then what I want you to do is I will sing the last three lines, and I want you to sing each line back to me. It's very simple. Allow us to tell you. It's plain, it's simple. Rosie, we want to say thanks. From our American spirit, we want you to hear it. In unity, we say thanks. You've got a brave heart. You serve, that's present tense. You serve with a good start. And you got a riveting rosy smile. You worked in D.C., California, Kentucky, all across America. Now we're lucky. Thank you, Rosie, with a riveting smile. Thank you, Rosie, with a riveting smile. Thank you, Rosie, with a riveting smile. Now I'm going to sing. I'm not a singer. But I'm going to sing a line, and you sing it back to me. I have to think about this and switch my gears a little bit. So that's the beginning, and the end is, thank you, Rosie, with your riveting smile. Come on now. Thank you, Rosie, with your riveting smile. Now, this is the good one. Thank you, Rosie, with your riveting smile. Okay? Thank you with your riveting smile. Let's do it again. You sing it with me. Thank you, Rosie, with your riveting smile. Thank you, Rosie, with your riveting smile. Thank you, Rosie, with your riveting smile. And the reason we smile is we have freedom. We have freedom to do what needs to be done in this country. This is America. We will do it, and we are doing it. And you have to smile while you say, I have the opportunity to face problems with my own country because we have the freedom to do what should be done. Thank you.